So welcome everybody to the May 19th, 2020 edition of the Analytics Weekly Call. So it looks like we have some FYIs to go through, or for people to read through. The first vocalized item on the agenda is walking through blockers and at-risk items. And I think there was at least one based on comments on the planning issue. But I'll let anybody, bring up whatever they want here. And maybe I was wrong about the blocker. No blockers? Cool. Well, that was easy. Next thing, John Mason, over to you for walking through on-deck issues.
Great. Let me share my screen here. All right. We've got a set of 3 issues that we'd like to take in as part of the 13.1 release. And there's already been some very good discussion on these. The first is the group activity new members chart. I think, reviewed this some last week, but we've made a lot of progress on kind of clarifying what this is. The basic idea being that in the group recent activity, we can drill down on the members added and then link over to a chart that shows members added over time. Of course, the whole reason we're doing this is to create that kind of generic capability where we can use the same page for other kinds of metrics. And in the 3 that follow, we'll do the issues opened and merge requests opened and so on. So I wanted to point out that not only do we have these 3 stories really scoped down, and but that also in the parent issue, which has been really cleaned up and a lot simpler here, the details being moved down into our MVC. Here are the 2 follow-on issues. And the main idea with the follow-on issues is that there really shouldn't be any new code to write to enable these if we've done the first one correctly. So these 3 things we're hoping to bring into 13.1. And then there are some other things that if we had time, we could tackle. Things like grouping by day and month, supporting a second series and so on. But these are all follow-on type items that are not in scope for these 3 things that we've split off. An issue that could possibly be worked in parallel on the front end after some design work is this PGAs issue around adding a second y-axis to our charts so that you could have a chart that looks like this that had both bars and a line. So we've got a PGAs issue open about that. So one question I have for you all about, when we've got new chart components like this is, do we open 2 issues, one PGAs issue and then one issue on the front end in GitLab.org, or does the work happen in the PGAs issue? How does that ordinarily work?
That's a good question regarding the PGAs issue. I'm not sure. From a front-end perspective, we would technically just open an issue in GitLab UI to make the proper updates to the existing chart. So we would have like a separate GitLab UI issue to make sure that we can keep track of the required changes that we need to do on the charts. My question is, does this need to be a PG issue at all? Since it's more or less like adding a configuration option to an existing chart, right? We're not really changing existing behavior. We're not really changing the styles. So I wonder if we really need a PGAs issue for that. But that's probably something that Nick can answer.
There are a couple of key stages within Pajamas, which is trying to align GitLab UI and PJs together. And the breakdown of those stages are create, build, style, and integrate. I think that is. And create is essentially where you design it or you update the designs. Build and style, is where you actually implement, create it in UI, and then integrate is where you actually implement it. So the way it should work is basically the need arises where a new component, the need arises for an update to a component. We start by doing the create PJs issue. That once that's created and designed, we then feed that over to the build and style phase. That's when something gets created within GitLab UI, and that's where it actually gets built. And the PJs issue is closed down when you sort of document the changes and stuff. The GitLab UI issue is closed down when it's actually integrated, and then that component could be leveraged, and that can be used in our feature issues, if that makes any sense. It's convoluted, to say the least.
No, that makes sense. I was just wondering if we need a dedicated PGs issue for such a, I'm calling it a small minor change, since it's basically, we already have styles and everything defined for one y-axis, and it's pretty much copying the existing design spec for the second y-axis, if I understand correctly. So, but I understand that we need to go through the process. So in that case, we probably need two issues, one for PJs, and then ideally, if that's signed off and reviewed, then we can start working on the GitLab UI issue. Even though I believe for such a small change, I don't really expect too much pushback from the design review. So I suppose we can already start if we have capacity. Obviously, this is a lower priority issue in the milestone, but if we had already capacity for this, we could already start working on that in parallel. But to answer John Mason's question, yes, I guess we should create two issues, one for PJs, which we already have, that's the linked one, and then we should create a dedicated or a separate issue within GitLab UI that we can link to the PGAs issue.
Great. Nick, would you be the best person to kind of walk me through what the expectations are for what the GitLab UI issue should look like as opposed to the PGAs issue? Or is Martin, are you the right person to give me kind of an example so I know how to do that in a way that is going to be consumable?
Sure, I can help you with that, John Mason, or I can also create the issue and then ping you on the issue afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much.
What I'd expect, John Mason, is if you would create a feature issue and you'd say, oh, I think we need to update this component, I would probably most likely create the component for the PJs issue. And then I'd imagine Martin would be the person, or another front-end engineer would be the person who created the UI, GitLab UI issue.
Okay. So in this case is just having I mean, you don't really want 3 issues for that, right? You want 2, I assume. So is it just good enough in general for me to like put a pointer here and then ask you guys to create the issues, or?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think you need to create 3 issues. I think we can start with with one, and then we can, like, developers, whenever we feel like we want to have the y-axis being used in a chart, like developers would say, okay, I realize we don't have this feature yet. I would just go over to GitLab UI, create the issue for that, and then we can update our components accordingly.
All right, cool. Thanks very much. So the one point I want to stress here is, while it's really important for our upcoming release to knock out these three things, I don't expect that we're going to get all of the things on this list. We might get 0, we might get 2. I mean, I have no idea. You know, we don't even have issues created for these. So my expectation is really only that we would be able to knock out these 3. Now, I don't think we actually have estimates on them yet, because we're still having some backend conversation about them. But my hope is that we can drive that backend conversation, not to, you know, answer all questions, but to the level where we can actually, you know, put a rough estimate on it and bring it into the release and, you know, get started on this. Remember that the scope of problems that we're trying to solve really is just defined in these 3 stories at this point. And we don't need to solve all the problems that we will get to eventually. Then I've already created the planning issue for 13.2, and I'll start creating issues for 13.2 this coming week. And here are some of the kinds of things I could imagine being in there, like a story about pre-computed measures or user-supplied data sets, user customizable report pages. Now, I just to be clear, I don't think we're going to get these all done in 13.2, right? We'll get a few of them done, but this is to give you a sense of, these are the things that I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about the progression of this, you know, generic report page piece. So hopefully this gives us a little bit of kind of a look ahead as to what's coming with regard to that kind of really important building block from which we'll build a lot of other stuff in the future. Are there questions about these 3 stories, or about kind of where we're going with these milestones and so on?
So just
you go ahead, Martin.
Just one question regarding the MVC. So the idea is to pretty much start with the new members chart, and have like this generic setup, or the generic drilling page being implemented. So the only thing that would be missing in order to deliver the other remaining items, which is MR's chart and issues chart, would be the link on the recent activity page. And clicking on that should out of the box show the charts for the other 2 metrics. Is that correct, John Mason?
Yeah. So that's right. There would just be the front end issue, and there might be some configuration change. Like you might have to have another YML file, or you might have to say, if you decided to take a pre-computed approach, which I think we're kind of steering away from, as I understand the state of the conversation. But if we were to do that, then if you were to write, you know, some aggregation, or to have an API call on the side where you push the data in, that would be fine too. But the main thing is, on the front end, there really is no new work. That's really what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
I was going to ask if maybe from the front end side and the back end side, we could kind of explain where we feel like we're at on that issue. So I think on the backend side, the big question right now is how to handle the data set definitions. And it's still a little bit of an open question, like we're making progress, but still a little bit of an open question. And I was just curious, like where things stand on the front end. Are there any blockers?
I guess the main blocking issue from a front end perspective would be at the moment to have like a clear understanding how the data structure is going to look like that front end's going to work with. So so depending on which approach we want to follow on the backend side, I think it would make sense to, or at least it would help front end a lot to agree on a proposal, like an API spec or a YAML spec, or however the data structure is going to be delivered, that we can implement, or that we can work with mocks on the front end side, so we can start implementation as soon as possible. Other than that, I don't expect too many blockers for now, since the MVC from a front end perspective is not super sophisticated. We're just showing a chart, and if we can agree on like a generic data structure that we can feed into the chart, I don't see too many blocking items at the moment.
We had been talking about basically having that decision be driven by, you know, the needs of the chart, like so effectively e-charts or you know, whatever we're wrapping around e-charts. So I'm wondering if the front end can drive that. Can you guys just tell us what you want there?
Yeah, I guess that's one approach we can do. We can just make sure, or we can double check what data format, not format, but what data structure the column chart expects. As I already mentioned, I think different charts have different requirements in terms of how the data needs to look like. But for the MVC, we will focus on the column chart. So it's a good starting point, and we can provide the desired format and then check with you guys on the back end if that makes sense.
I think that sounds good. Yeah, we can try to make it easy on everybody on the front end.
Nice.
How about on the back end? Are there questions that I can answer? Is there, what kind of next steps should we be taking there? How can I help?
I think there is one about the delivery mechanism. So should we start using GraphQL to send the data to the front end, or still stick to, you know, standard JSON API?
Adam, you wrote kind of in response to that data set definition question, you know, you wrote about an idea to use GraphQL as kind of our data set definition, which I thought was really interesting. So I think GraphQL is at least on the table right now, in my mind anyway.
When I've used GraphQL for stuff in the past, what I found that it's really good at is, you know, picking which columns of data or you know, which data attributes you want to display, and sort of how you want to traverse the object graph across related objects. I've not used it for aggregation, and I'm not sure kind of what the capabilities there are, or how helpful it would be there. It's a lot easier for me to imagine how a GraphQL query would be useful for rendering the table below the chart, where you would want that data table to be configurable, you know, to have certain columns which are turned on, off, and on, and GraphQL could help drive that, than it is for me to picture how it would be used for the aggregation. But
well, I guess maybe we can sort of continue this discussion in the issue.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Let's see.
But thanks for putting this issue together, John Mason. I think the not only the where we will start section, but also the upcoming tasks or what's planned for 13.2 helps to get a better understanding about this whole or about this entire generic real same page.
Good. Well, I hope it's helpful, and you know, I welcome your feedback. Happy to you know, keep working to make things better. I just remembered one other thing I wanted to run past you on the planning issue. One of the items we had on the planning issue is a to-do section, and we had a number of items here: a resolution mechanism capturing the timestamp, and then also introducing a closed state and so on. We just had the feature kickoff, and we actually had a lot of feedback on this particular issue roll in as part of the kickoff. And until we get some further discussion on the closed state and primarily the button at the top, I think we should consider these two on hold. These things, the top three are ready to go, no problem. And these we may you know, release the hold on it, but I don't want to do anything there just yet. Give us a few days.
May I ask, where is this discussion happening about the closed state?
It is. You should actually see a comment from Eric Brinkman on the to-do issue itself, on the closed state issue. And there was some conversation about it on the kickoff call, which is on GitLab Unfiltered. So there's a managed stage kickoff video, and this is one of the items that was discussed there.
So John Mason, is there a chance we wouldn't be moving forward on those, or are they just delayed?
I think it's possible. But I would say we'll have answers in the next few days as to what we're going to do there.
Okay. I'm just wondering.
Has work started on either of them?
So I'm checking capturing the timestamp of resolution. Looks like nothing there. Sorry, Magda, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm working currently on the on the introduce closed state.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. Where are you in?
Just add, the more I prototype it out, it doesn't really make sense to add the closed state if we're designing around a particular inbox, which I can show you later, John Mason.
Yeah. Where are you on that one?
In the midst, doing the backend. I don't know how to describe it better.
Okay. Yeah, my suggestion would be to stash your changes on that and work on the resolution mechanism, this top one here.
Okay, fine, thanks.
I'm just checking to make sure that that's not already. So that's Pavel. That's currently assigned to you. It looks like it's still workflow ready for development. Now workflow and dev. Pavel, you haven't started that one, right? Resolution mechanism.
Yeah. It's still in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. So I guess what I'll do is maybe put those back to workflow scheduling and bump them out of 13.1, just, you know, kind of tentatively. John Mason, are you comfortable with that? John Mason, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So just to be clear, these ones at the top are good to go as planned. It's just these two on the bottom in the on hold section that we want to pause.
So is timestamp of resolution, like, should we be investing in the feature set as a whole if we're not sure if we're moving forward?
We definitely should. These are independent, you know, but all of these things are intended to drive user research for work that we're going to be doing in 13.2, right? And the resolution mechanism is really important, provides really important data.
So not the resolution mechanism, that seems fine to me, but the timestamp of resolution seems kind of predicated on us having, you know, kind of a more robust set of options for reaching a resolution state. You know, if it is what it is now, where it's done, you know, it's either pending or done, and it's very simple. I'm not sure, like, basically, if we're not sure we're going further down the road, do we need to be differentiating the timestamp for resolution?
So we had the reason we introduced this was so that we could, because right now we're relying on the timestamp of the
updated,
you know, of the last update, right?
Yeah.
Of the last update. And I think with the fix that we made to that in the last release, where all of those dates are set to the same date when I hit the bulk button, I think that gives me what I need.
Okay. Great.
So yeah, this timestamp I think was just to help us future-proof, you know, I've always felt like, yes, it's valuable for future-proofing, but it doesn't really provide anything today that I would need one way or the other. So.
Okay, great. So I'll bump that one, and then the two that are listed as on hold. And actually, I'll go ahead and modify the issue and move that timestamp of resolution on hold. And I think we're good.
All right, thank you. All right, that's all I've got on my side. I guess the other one we had talked about before was track the amount of time the issue is spent with a particular label. I've already marked that as not selected in this iteration. And we'll have follow-up conversations on that, but we won't expect that it would find its way into this release. Back to you, Dan.
Cool. I can get back to my agenda here. All right, cool. Oh, interesting problems and solutions from last week. It looks like we have something from Martin.
I can do it now, or we're running out. We're almost at time, are we? Or
I think we're scheduled for 40 minutes.
Oh, okay, cool. So if you still have a couple more minutes, I'm happy to give a quick demo of that feature. Let me share my screen real quick.
Awesome.
So basically, from a UI perspective, there's not much new to expect. We have code review. This is the previous filter bar or the legacy filter bar that we have. And the issue I'm talking about is the legacy filter bar has some limitations, especially when it comes to adding additional filter tokens that we want to use in the future. So at the moment, it's possible to use milestone, labels, assignees, and those kind of things. But for example, one of the main limitations is that you cannot use projects or groups and stuff like that. So the reason I'd like to demo this is because I used code review to build an MVC for the new filter bar. which is behind a feature flag. So I just need to enable the feature flag. Okay. The only thing that's missing for the new version is the recent searches dropdown. So this is not implemented yet. But other than that, we have the same possibility to filter by token, for example, to filter by milestone. So that's something that already works for the existing version and also works in the new version. We also have the possibility to add additional tokens easily. So we could easily add a project dropdown, a project token or a group token. And that's also something that's interesting for us, especially since one of the newer features that we will be working on is adding a filter bar to value stream analytics, where ideally in a follow-up iteration, we will be migrating the projects dropdown to basically show up as a filter option in the filter bar. So that's something that the new filter bar should allow us. And another cool thing that's also that we can also benefit in the analytics space is that once you have defined those filter tokens, how they look and behave. For example, in the milestone token, we only have milestones showing up as plain text, whereas on the label token, we have labels with the corresponding colored rectangle in front of them. So once you have defined such a token, it can easily be reused across the entire analytics space, and we can we can implement the filter bar from scratch for particular features, but the tokens is something that we can reuse easily, and I think that's something that we can benefit in other features as well. So again, from a first glance, it's nothing. The look and feel hasn't changed compared to the existing or the legacy version, but the technical capabilities are way better now in terms of reusability and extended behavior. Yeah, I think the only thing that's still missing, and that's something I'd like to work on in this milestone, is the recent searches dropdown to add this to the existing version, to the new version. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, one question actually, maybe for you, John Mason or Nick. Do you think it's worth enabling this for the GitLab project or the GitLab group on production? As I said, we don't have the recent searches dropdown, so I'm not sure if we should enable it globally or maybe just per project or per group. Is that something that we feel confident about, or do you think we should not enable it until we have the dropdown here as well?
I'd be interested in others' points of view on this, but in my view, that having that recent searches dropdown is pretty valuable capability, and I think people might miss it. If at least I, when I'm doing searches, I use it all the time. So my inclination would be to add that before migrating.
Okay.
Nick?
Yeah,
you have
I guess
a view?
it makes sense.
How long would it take to implement the recent searches as just a rough thing?
I'm not sure yet. I need to look into the existing implementation.
Right.
I think that the entire component is quite messy on the legacy side of things. So it's not super easy. So I'm not talking about a day or two. It's probably a little longer.
Right.
But I'm hoping I can get it done this milestone if I find some time. So yeah, but I understand that this is something that the current implementation of code review. So the feature is part of the current code review page. So taking it away might upset some users because they might miss it, and they probably feel that this is a bug, or they don't understand the reasoning behind why this dropdown was removed. So I guess it makes sense to wait a little longer to enable this feature.
Yeah, agreed. I think keep the recent search thing and wait until we have everything.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks again for working on that and for showing it. That's great.
Cool. I think we have a little bit of bonus content. I'm not sure if we want to go through these items then.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of running out of time, so let's treat them mostly as FYIs. I guess on this first one, I think most of us here, possibly all of us here, I'm not sure actually, have not been through an annual 360 feedback cycle before. So just so everybody knows, it stretches over a few weeks. And I asked him if he had any advice because he's been through it a couple of times, and he said, be sure to spread that work, you know, the feedback work across all of those weeks. Don't wait until the last week or it can bite you. So I thought that was good advice and just wanted to pass it on. But let's treat the rest of this like FYIs, and we can go ahead and wrap up the call. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye.
John Mason, have
Bye.
you got 5 minutes? Do you want to just stay on here?
Yep, happy to.
Cool.
I need to assign somebody as a new host, so it's just defaulting to John Mason. So I'll assign it to you, John Mason, as the host.
Okay,
Out of here.
thank you.
Thanks.
So I I'm more confident on the research plan now. So what I want to do is just quickly show you the high level sort of thinking for the agenda of what we test, and then the actual content of the research stimuli, just to quickly validate that with you. So the stuff I'm building is sort of not wasted time. So I have removed all these jobs to be done here and focused specifically on this responding to notifications one. And the key, so this one, this is the primary job to be done. When checking in on my team's need, what my team needs from me, I want to quickly identify and respond to the most important notifications, so I'm not blocking their flow. Based on that, the research objectives I think are most important are gaining an understanding of this particular job to be done, validate the different categories or buckets that we have as a hypothesis for differentiating, validate these 3 buckets, and then get user feedback on the solution ideas relating to this, and then also understand how users feel about certain metrics relating to this this specific job to be done. These are the 4 ones. I'm much happier now. These are very focused, and I think it's sort of very clear in how we can actually address that. Based on that, the way that I think would be a good way of testing this is we go into a discussion, we have a discussion. In the discussion, to start out with, we'll just do like the general background stuff, and then we'll get into a bit of we'll discuss general task management. And what I've done previously is I get up this mural board and I start just getting them to talk, and we start noting down the steps in their process for task management, and they can sort of outline from notification all the way to taking action what those steps are, and then we could use this to deep dive into the particular steps and figure out what the current pains and stuff are. So that's a nice visual way to discuss task management in general. And then from there, we can use that as a way to actually dive into specific areas such as to-dos and get them to walk us through to-dos, and then get them to walk us through how they use notifications and if they use activity as well. So that sort of sets a good context and gives us some good nuance towards the job to be done and also the current solutions today. After that, we dive into the research stimuli, and though there are 4 in total, maybe collapse 1 or 2 of them together, but 4 in general. First one is card sorting, and the way we'll do that is I will provide a number of cards to start out with, and we'll do an open card sort, which is give them no categories whatsoever. So I'll probably give them about 15 cards. I've done like all the different options of things that you could be notified about. And I'll just collapse this down to a smaller list so it's easier to deal with, but basically get them to organize this themselves, get them to like organize it in a few different ways, and then after that we go into a closed card sort where we take the same cards and get them to sort them into our predefined buckets. So we get their perspective on how they do it, and then we test out our perspective as well, and then the gap between that and the difference would yield some quite interesting stuff. From there, we then go into testing out the different prototypes and different research stimuli, and grouping those into like basically a story and a flow, and then getting them to sort of react and go through the flow and comment on that. So the first flow I wanted to test out is effectively the inbox structure, and like the concept of using this as an inbox, and then some of the new functionality we add in order to do that. And I've started prototyping that one already. And then the second one would be around taking action, basically looking at some of the metrics that we include within the inbox, and then taking action on those in some way, and then understanding we can include some like potentially risky ones, like comparing your productivity to your team's productivity and stuff, and that could spark some interesting insights and discussion. And then finally, yeah, we would then go out and zoom out slightly to testing those three buckets again of the home view. So inbox, newsfeed, and like tasks, and then getting them to discuss that in prototype form, really. So I think we can achieve that. Like this one we can manage. I think all these ones we can actually manage. Potentially we could strip away some time here. I think the card sorting activity, or we could strip a little bit of time out of here, so it's about 25 minutes in total to start out with. But I think this is a nice research thing, which will give us some good content in general. And then we just need to decide what specific features we want to be testing in each one of these ones, which I've started to lay out the flow and the features that we want to be testing as it is. So I'll pause there and get your thoughts and feedback. You're on mute.
This is a lot more focused. It makes a lot of sense to me. The approach that you're taking, I think it's a good mix of open-ended and directed kinds of exercises that are going to give us the breadth of information we're looking for. So this looks great. I think the magic is going to be in the prompts. What are those particular cards that we have them sort? I'll go into the mural and take a look there. I assume that mural is linked from the document here.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take a look at that. What else? The word notification.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense here because it's a neutral word. The one little worry in the back of my mind was whether it would slightly bias us or the participants to think of just the passive kinds of notification rather than, something I need to respond to. And I was trying to think of other words. Alerts is another possible word, but it also has other connotations. It might be an improvement, but I don't have other ideas. Concrete ideas about that. But that was the only other thing that kind of stood out to me as kind of a head scratch moment.
Yeah. The only time we'll actually mention notifications is how they appear today.